In 1873, high above a valley in northern Italy, where cliffs meet forest and mist clings like a shroud, a convent rose silently, its stone walls cold and immovable, as though carved from the mountains themselves. 12 nuns lived within, devoted to prayer, discipline, and a life removed from the world's corruption. Yet one night, all 12 vanished. Candles flickered unattended, meals remained on tables, and the chapel echoed with an eerie emptiness that no sunlight could penetrate. The village below murmured in disbelief, some claiming to see shadowy figures moving among the trees, others swearing that the air itself had grown thick with a presence too dark to name. Whispers spread of forest spirits, entities locals had long feared, ancient and hungry, waiting for souls foolish enough to wander near. Others pointed fingers at human hands, strangers, secretive cults, or even internal betrayal. The most unsettling accounts spoke of chanting, not the soft recitations of prayer, but guttural sounds that rose and fell, heard long after dawn in the hollow corridors of the abandoned convent. Scholars argue over the cause. Some say the silence of the convent was the result of extreme religious devotion, a collective psychological unraveling under isolation. Others claim malevolent influence, either human or supernatural, had taken hold of the sisters, drawing them beyond the bounds of mortal comprehension. Still others speculate on cosmic misalignment, an anomaly of time, space, and faith intersecting, to erase the nuns from the world entirely. What makes the story so compelling is its collision of contradictions. Facts are scant, yet rumors abound. Reports describe footsteps in empty halls, shadows that move against the light, and doors that lock themselves without explanation. Villagers remember the night differently. Some say they glimpsed cloaked figures slipping into the forest. Others insist they saw no one at all. The convent, once a sanctuary of routine and ritual, became a stage for fear, speculation, and legend. Even today, centuries later, the stone walls remain, silent witnesses to an event that refuses to yield answers. Tonight we step into this intersection of faith, fear, and the unexplained. We explore how innocence and devotion may have clashed with darkness, whether human or beyond, and how 12 women vanished into a story that would haunt generations. Was it a case of fanaticism spiraling beyond control? A crime too cunning to detect? Or something older, a presence that defies reason? The convent's secrets remain sealed, yet its echoes call to us, challenging the line between reality and myth, asking us to confront what lurks in shadow and silence. And so, we begin, not with certainty but with questions, the first tremors of a mystery that refuses to die. The Convent of Lost Souls, perched on cliffs high above a mist-laden valley in northern Italy, was founded in 1820 by Mother Elisabetta, a woman whose reputation for devout faith was rivaled only by whispers of her mystical abilities. Known for her strict discipline and the quiet authority with which she ruled her fledgling order, Elisabetta drew attention from devout families and curious onlookers alike. She claimed visions that guided her in selecting the convent's location, insisting that the valley's isolation was both a spiritual protection and a crucible for purification. To outsiders, the convent was a place of serene devotion, a sanctuary of prayer and learning. To those who entered its stone walls, however, there was a different reality, a combination of discipline, fear, and mystery that would shape the lives of 12 women who would later vanish under circumstances that remain unexplained to this day. The convent's architecture itself reinforced the sense of otherworldly seclusion. Thick stone walls, tall arched windows, and narrow corridors created a labyrinthine interior, illuminated only by the flickering light of candle sconces. Rooms were Spartan, furnished with only essentials for prayer and rest. Common areas were dominated by symbols of faith, crucifixes, sacred paintings, and statues of saints whose eyes seemed to follow the observer's movements. To a visitor, the space projected serenity and devotion, yet the rigid structure, the endless hours of repetitive prayer, and the strict hierarchy of authority cultivated an atmosphere in which fear could take root, unnoticed, alongside piety. Some historians argue that the isolation and regimented routines created fertile ground for psychological strain, the kind that can warp perception and magnify ordinary fears into sources of terror. The valley surrounding the convent, often blanketed in fog, reinforced this separation from the world, as if nature itself conspired to contain the sisters within an invisible cage. Mother Elisabetta was as enigmatic as the convent itself. She insisted on absolute obedience but was rumored to possess insight into matters that went beyond human understanding. Some villagers whispered that she could see the future, that she had predicted illness, death, and events that would occur decades later. These claims, whether true or exaggerated, gave her an authority that extended beyond conventional religious leadership. Letters and diaries discovered years later reveal a duality in her leadership style: publicly benevolent, yet privately demanding and exacting. The nuns she recruited were drawn by faith, desperation, or the promise of a life removed from worldly suffering. Many were women escaping personal trauma, loss, abuse, or scandal in their families, and the convent offered not only refuge but a structure in which their days were filled with purpose and ritual. Yet even as the convent provided sanctuary, evidence suggests it also fostered unease. Diaries written by the nuns themselves, some hidden beneath floorboards or sealed in chests, reveal recurring mentions of shadows at night, unexplained sounds, and voices that whispered from corners when no one was present. One entry notes that a figure appeared by the chapel altar, vanishing when approached, leaving only a faint scent of incense and cold air. Another recounts the sensation of being watched while alone in the dormitory, a presence that left no footprint or trace. These observations suggest a tension between the nuns' spiritual devotion and their psychological fragility. Faith offered comfort, yet in isolation, it may have also magnified fear, transforming ordinary occurrences into sources of dread. Some historians argue that the convent's structure and practices cultivated a kind of fanaticism. Nuns were required to wake before dawn for prayer, attend multiple services each day, and adhere to rigid routines that left little room for personal reflection or escape. Punishments for disobedience were subtle but effective: cold glances, public admonishment, or increased workload. Over time, such pressure can shape behavior and perception, creating an environment in which fear, obedience, and superstition reinforce each other. To outsiders, this may appear as devotion. To those inside, it may have felt like a gilded cage, where each step was watched and every thought judged. In this light, the convent was not merely a religious sanctuary, but a psychological crucible, testing the limits of faith, endurance, and human perception. Contrasting the apparent serenity with the underlying tension, letters to family members describe both peace and fear. One young nun wrote that she found comfort in prayer, but often could not sleep, haunted by glimpses of figures moving silently in the corridors. Another described hearing chanting at night, distinct from the official services, which seemed to echo through walls where no one could be. These accounts hint at a dual reality: a place outwardly devoted to God, yet inwardly harboring fear, uncertainty, and unexplained phenomena. In this paradox, the convent becomes a lens through which to view the complex interplay between innocence, devotion, and vulnerability, as well as the potential for evil, human or otherwise, to emerge. Where authority and isolation converge, the convent's valley, largely inaccessible except by narrow paths carved into cliffs, further isolated the nuns from external influence. Villagers rarely visited, and supplies were delivered under strict supervision. This physical and social isolation intensified the convent's psychological atmosphere. A woman entering from the outside world would feel removed from time itself. The fog, the wind, the sheer drop of cliffs below, and the impenetrable forest beyond combined to create a sense of both awe and apprehension. Within this context, even minor events, an unlit candle, a misplaced book, a whisper in the night, could take on outsized significance, interpreted as omens, divine signs, or malevolent interference. The convent itself, with its architecture, rituals, and geography, functioned as both sanctuary and prison, a space in which the boundaries between reality, faith, and fear could easily blur. Diaries and letters also reveal a fascination with the supernatural among the nuns. Some wrote of dreams in which they were guided by light through the forest. Others described encounters with shadows that spoke in incomprehensible voices. Some interpreted these experiences as divine, others as warnings of unseen danger. This dual interpretation reflects the tension between belief and fear, illustrating how psychological pressures, isolation, and spiritual intensity can converge to produce experiences that are both real and terrifyingly ambiguous. Was the convent a place of miraculous devotion, or a crucible in which fear and superstition thrived? The answer, as with much in the story of the lost souls, remains elusive, buried in letters, walls, and memories. The paradox of the convent extends to the nuns themselves. Outwardly serene, disciplined, and devoted, they were privately anxious, fearful, and attuned to phenomena that defied explanation. They were at once innocent and vulnerable, yet subject to the strict authority and intense rituals of Mother Elisabetta. The convent's isolation and structure magnified the contrasts between light and shadow, devotion and dread, human and supernatural, creating a pressure cooker that would culminate decades later in the vanishing of 12 women, whose fate continues to baffle historians, psychologists, and paranormal investigators alike. In examining the origins of the convent, one begins to see how environment, faith, and human psychology intertwined, forming the foundation for one of history's most haunting mysteries. The night of September 14, 1873, arrived like a storm-swept omen. Thick clouds swallowed the valley, blotting out stars and moonlight, leaving the convent perched atop cliffs in near-complete darkness. The wind swept through the trees like a chorus of whispers, carrying with it the scent of rain, damp earth, and something indefinably ancient. Within the convent, the 12 nuns followed their routines with a precision honed by decades of discipline, unaware that this night would become the most infamous in the institution's history. The last confirmed sighting of the sisters places them in the chapel around evening vespers, candles flickering against the stone walls, their voices raised in hymns of devotion. To anyone observing from the valley below, there was nothing unusual. Yet, history would later reveal that this night marked the sudden unraveling of both order and life, as it was known within the convent. As the evening wore on, villagers reported hearing chanting, distinct from the standard prayers or hymns. The voices were low, guttural, and reverberated unnaturally through the forested valley, sounding almost as if amplified by unseen forces. Some witnesses insisted they could distinguish 12 distinct voices, while others believed it was one voice multiplied, echoing in the wind. Fear spread quickly among those in the village. Windows were bolted, doors locked, and animals refused to enter the night. Some accounts claimed that lanterns flickered in the fog near the convent, yet no one dared approach the stone gates to verify the source. Others swore they saw ghostly figures moving through the mist, their robes appearing to float above the forest floor, as though detached from human form. Contradictory as these accounts were, they would all become part of the enduring legend, a mosaic of fear, rumor, and incomplete observation that blurred the line between reality and imagination. Official records of the night are as fragmentary as the fog that enveloped the valley. Police reports, some now lost or destroyed, hint at bribes paid to keep witnesses silent, missing pages in logbooks, and statements that contradict each other in crucial details. One officer's report notes that a group of locals claimed to hear the nuns chanting cease abruptly, followed by the unnatural quiet of absolute absence. Another records villagers stating that lanterns had vanished, leaving the convent dark and silent. The tension between these official accounts and eyewitness recollections creates a haunting contrast, mundane explanations versus inexplicable phenomena. Were the nuns abducted by human hands, spirited away into some secretive plot? Or did something beyond comprehension intervene, a supernatural force exacting its will with perfect precision? Historians, criminologists, and folklorists continue to debate these questions, each field approaching the story with its own assumptions and limitations, yet none capable of providing definitive answers. Some suggest that the disappearance was the result of a ritual gone wrong. Reports of chanting, the alignment of candles, and the seeming choreography of the nuns' movements lend a ritualistic quality to the night. Diaries discovered decades later mention preparations for special ceremonies, ones that Mother Elisabetta conducted in secrecy, away from prying eyes. These accounts suggest that the sisters may have been participating in a ceremony intended to commune with the divine or access some mystical power. Yet the diaries are ambiguous, speaking in metaphor, using language that could refer to prayer or to esoteric practices. To modern observers, this ambiguity amplifies the mystery. Was the ritual interrupted? Did it collapse under collective psychological strain? Or did it succeed in some way that removed the sisters from the world entirely? Psychologists analyzing historical evidence suggest the possibility of mass hysteria or a collective psychological breakdown. Living in isolation, under strict discipline, and surrounded by fear, both real and perceived, can produce episodes of shared delusion or panic. Some speculate that the nuns, already attuned to the spiritual and mystical, could have collectively entered a state of trance or dissociation, leaving the convent in a manner that, at the time, appeared supernatural. The fog, wind, and storm would have intensified disorientation, and the villagers' imaginations may have filled in gaps, interpreting normal events as extraordinary. Even so, the complete disappearance of 12 adult women, without trace or explanation, challenges conventional psychological reasoning and leaves room for speculation beyond human understanding. The sequence of events during the night remains patchy, reconstructed only from fragmented accounts and secondary reports. Witnesses claim to see cloaked forms moving toward the forest edge, only to vanish as though swallowed by shadows. Some described faint light flares within the convent, as if candles had been multiplied, then extinguished all at once. Others report hearing metallic sounds, doors slamming without wind, and a distant bell ringing despite no one touching the instrument. Each detail reinforces the paradox. Events that appear natural can simultaneously appear otherworldly. In the absence of bodies, footprints, or definitive traces, these accounts fuel a tension between the ordinary and the inexplicable. Every fragmentary clue raises new questions, none of which lead to resolution. Villagers' reactions that night also add layers to the mystery. Some tried to approach the convent, lanterns in hand, only to be repelled by sudden gusts of wind or feeling, an invisible barrier. Others maintained that the forest itself seemed alive, rearranging paths and trees in a way that prevented entry. Whether these experiences were real, imagined, or influenced by fear, they contributed to the sense that the sisters' disappearance was orchestrated by forces beyond mortal comprehension. The narratives that emerged became intertwined with the natural landscape, the fog, cliffs, forest, and storm acting as silent accomplices to the vanishing. In the aftermath, conflicting reports surfaced about what occurred. Police interviews, censored and incomplete, suggested the possibility of a human plot. Perhaps kidnappers, outsiders, or a rival religious faction had intervened. Yet no evidence ever substantiated these claims. Simultaneously, spiritualists and mystics claimed the nuns had been carried into another realm, their physical forms replaced by shadows, leaving only their devotion behind. Accounts of subsequent dreams, visions, and ghost sightings tied to the convent strengthened the supernatural theory. The night's events were reconstructed through rumor, hearsay, and selective memory, creating a narrative as fractured and uncertain as the storm that raged the evening of their disappearance. The disappearance also highlights the interplay between fear, rumor, and memory. Villagers' testimonies diverged not only in detail, but in tone. Some insisted the nuns were taken by spirits, others blamed human hands, while a few believed the sisters had walked away voluntarily, escaping confinement or oppression. These divergent narratives show how human perception and cultural context shape memory and storytelling. In this way, the night of September 14th became more than an event. It became a canvas onto which villagers, historians, and investigators projected hopes, fears, and anxieties, each interpretation adding layers to the enigma of the lost sisters. Ultimately, the night of the disappearance resists explanation. Whether viewed through the lens of human malevolence, ritualistic failure, collective psychological phenomena, or supernatural intervention, it remains a moment frozen between possibility and impossibility. The evidence, incomplete and contradictory, mirrors the storm-laden valley itself. Murky, shifting, and impossibly deep. As scholars, mystics, and enthusiasts sift through fragments, they encounter not clarity, but more questions. Each new account, layering the story with tension, fear, and wonder. The convent's legacy of mystery is inseparable from that night, a night when 12 women vanished, leaving only silence, fog, and the unsettling sense that some truths are meant to remain, forever out of reach. In the weeks following the disappearance of the 12 nuns from the Convent of Lost Souls, the valley that had once been silent and mistbound became a hub of scrutiny, speculation, and fear. News of the vanishing spread across Italy, and eventually to other parts of Europe, attracting a flood of self-proclaimed experts, investigators, and curious onlookers, each determined to uncover the truth. Authorities arrived first, local magistrates and police officers, armed with notebooks, lanterns, and skepticism. They scoured the convent, documenting footprints, examining rooms, and questioning villagers who had witnessed, or thought they had witnessed, the events of that storm-laden night. Their methods were rudimentary by modern standards, yet precise for the era, relying on observation, measurement, and testimony. They hoped to reconstruct the events logically: abduction, voluntary flight, accident, or foul play. Yet every lead fragmented into more questions, and every step forward seemed to be met by a wall of ambiguity. Almost simultaneously, a different kind of investigator arrived: spiritualists, mediums, and mystics who claimed to communicate with the missing nuns. They carried pendulums, scrying mirrors, and crystal balls, and recited incantations in dimly lit rooms, claiming that the spirits of the sisters lingered in the chapel, trapped between the mortal world and a realm beyond comprehension. Some insisted that the nuns had been taken into another dimension, guided by divine or supernatural forces, and that their absence was temporary, awaiting the day they would return. Others spoke of malevolent entities, unseen yet powerful, who had ensnared the women for purposes unfathomable to ordinary humans. Locals often stood on the edges of these seances, curious, fearful, or desperate, clinging to hope that the nuns' presence could be summoned or communicated with. The contrast between investigators relying on observation and mystics relying on vision created a tension that would define the legend for decades. Conflicting reports emerged quickly. Detectives documented footprints leading away from the convent, into the forest, yet the trails vanished abruptly, leaving no indication of direction, purpose, or final destination. Lights were reported inside the convent after hours, yet no observer could verify their source. Sounds, doors slamming, chanting, whispers, were recorded by multiple witnesses, yet left no tangible evidence. Even weather conditions seemed to conspire with ambiguity. Fog obscured visibility, rain washed away tracks, and wind carried sounds that may or may not have existed. Each investigation, empirical or mystical, was thus complicated by environmental factors, human perception, and the very nature of the valley itself, which seemed almost to guard its secrets. The response of the families of the missing nuns added another layer to the mystery. Some parents, cousins, and distant relatives oscillated between rational hope and desperate faith. Letters were sent to authorities and spiritualists alike, requesting exhaustive searches and seances, reflecting both a desire for logical closure and a willingness to believe in the extraordinary. One family financed forensic efforts, bringing in experts from Florence who specialized in early criminology, hoping to uncover evidence of abduction or foul play. Another family turned to mystics, spending lavish sums on mediums who claimed to contact the missing nuns. The coexistence of rationality and superstition in these responses highlighted a universal struggle: the human need to reconcile reason with fear, to find certainty in the midst of incomprehensible loss. Scientists and skeptics were quick to dismiss supernatural claims. They argued that visions and apparitions were the products of grief, stress, and isolation. Atmospheric conditions, fog, reflections, candlelight, could explain most phenomena. Footsteps in the corridors could be traced to animals or structural settling of the building, yet the scientists' conclusions failed to satisfy villagers and families who had seen, heard, and felt events they could not dismiss. The local population embraced the mystical interpretations, sharing stories of shadowed figures and chanting echoes that reinforced the idea that the nuns' disappearance was a matter beyond human logic. As weeks turned into months, the divide between rational explanation and mystical belief hardened, ensuring that the legend would endure. Several investigators attempted to reconcile these contradictory perspectives. A commission from Rome, composed of both clerics and scholars, conducted a methodical study, cataloging evidence and interviewing witnesses. They acknowledged the inconsistencies in accounts but also noted patterns: the convergence of sound anomalies near the chapel, the timing of visual phenomena with changes in wind and fog, and repeated reports of footsteps vanishing into thin air. While they remained skeptical of mystical claims, the commission admitted that some phenomena defied conventional explanation, leaving open the possibility that events had occurred outside known physical or psychological parameters. Mediums, for their part, claimed that the nuns had left messages through dreams, visions, and trance states. One reported that she saw the sisters walking silently toward a radiant light beyond the forest, while another described a dark presence, blocking their path, leaving them suspended between worlds. These accounts were often vague, metaphorical, and open to interpretation, yet they captivated the public imagination. Newspapers eagerly reported these seances, creating a narrative of science versus superstition, reason versus belief, and mortal observation versus otherworldly experience. The story spread beyond the valley, drawing attention from academics, clergy, and curiosity seekers across Europe, all eager to weigh in with their own theories. The interplay of empirical investigation and mystical interpretation created a tension that persists to this day. Detectives who relied on evidence and logic struggled to explain the disappearance, while mystics who relied on vision and intuition claimed understanding without proof. Each group challenged the other. Scientists demanded evidence of supernatural phenomena. Mystics claimed that evidence was visible only to those attuned to higher perception. Villagers and families caught between these worlds became arbiters of legend, their stories, fears, and hopes woven into the fabric of the convent's history. In this tension lies the enduring fascination, humanity's simultaneous need for rational closure and mystical understanding, and the frustration that neither could provide certainty. Even decades later, investigations continued sporadically. Letters, diaries, and reports collected over the years show repeated attempts to find traces of the nuns, both in the physical world and beyond it. Footprints were analyzed, structural anomalies inspected, and meteorological patterns considered for their role in obscuring evidence. Spiritualists continued to conduct seances, claiming new visions and insights with every attempt. Each effort, whether rooted in science or faith, only added layers to the mystery, making resolution ever more elusive. The narrative of the convent of lost souls became not a matter of fact but a tapestry of interpretations, a legend sustained by the very contradictions that defined the night of disappearance. Ultimately, the efforts of investigators and mystics illuminate the profound human struggle to confront the unknown. The coexistence of empirical method and supernatural belief demonstrates a deep cultural need to impose order on chaos, to reconcile fear with reason, and to understand events that defy explanation. Yet in the case of the 12 vanished nuns, all attempts at explanation failed to produce definitive answers. The evidence, ambiguous and contradictory, ensures that the legend endures, inviting debate, speculation, and wonder. The valley remains, the convent stands, and the echoes of that night linger, forever intertwining science and superstition, rationality and belief, in a story that continues to haunt every attempt at understanding. In the months and years following the disappearance of the 12 nuns from the Convent of Lost Souls, the valley itself seemed to hold its breath. The convent remained standing, unchanged, its stone walls weathered only by time, while the surrounding forest thickened, almost as if nature itself sought to obscure the truth. Though no nun ever returned, the village below became the site of indirect encounters, fleeting signs, and cryptic messages that hinted at the sisters' lingering presence. Letters arrived months later, unsigned, written in the careful script of someone who might have been the missing nuns or a messenger acting on their behalf. The letters contained fragments of mundane observations, prayers and warnings, sometimes referencing places within the convent that had been sealed or forgotten. Each arrival of such correspondence caused ripples of hope and fear simultaneously, for the content was never entirely clear, nor was it possible to authenticate the sender. Some villagers believed the letters were from spirits, others suspected fraud, yet the mysterious nature of each message only intensified the legend. Dreams became another medium through which the nuns' presence was felt. Locals and former novices reported vivid visions in which the sisters appeared, often clothed in white habits, floating just beyond reach, or gesturing toward hidden corners of the convent and forest. Some dreamers claimed that these nocturnal visitations conveyed warnings, cryptic advice about dangers that were difficult to interpret, but seemed urgent and real. Psychologists studying these accounts later suggested that the dreams reflected collective trauma, stress-induced imagery, and the power of suggestion within a tightly knit, fear-driven community. The brain, confronted with mystery and loss, sought resolution through subconscious projection, converting anxiety into vision. Yet the vividness of some experiences, reported consistently across multiple witnesses, left room for interpretation beyond mere psychological explanation. Was there a spiritual or supernatural dimension to these nocturnal messages, or were they the manifestation of fear, memory, and imagination entwined? Stone walls near the convent also became mediums of cryptic communication. Villagers discovered markings, lines, symbols, and initials that appeared seemingly overnight. Some argued they were the work of the sisters, leaving behind warnings or clues, while others believed they were pranks, a means for the human mind to impose pattern on randomness. Linguists and scholars later attempted to decipher the symbols, noting the mixture of conventional letters, arcane runes, and abstract shapes. The more the symbols were studied, the more they resisted definitive interpretation. Each line seemed to suggest meaning while simultaneously concealing it, creating a sense of perpetual uncertainty. In this tension between legibility and ambiguity lies the enduring fascination. The nuns' absence becomes presence, their silence becomes voice, and the limits of human comprehension are tested. The villagers' own reactions added layers to the narrative. Many avoided the convent, fearing curses or malevolent forces that might linger among its corridors. Yet curiosity and obligation compelled some to observe from afar, noting flickers of light in windows or sudden movements in the fog. Former novices who had left the convent before the disappearance provided testimony that was fragmentary but chilling. Reports of unexplained footsteps in empty halls, cold drafts in sealed rooms, and fleeting sensations of being watched. These accounts were consistent in their evocation of unease, though they differed in detail, creating a pattern of both repetition and discrepancy. Psychologists examining these patterns suggested that repeated exposure to rumor, coupled with isolation and grief, could create shared hallucinatory experiences. Yet from the perspective of those who lived through the events, the experiences felt undeniable and immediate. Some villagers began to speak of protective presence. Accounts describe objects moving subtly, a book shifting on a shelf, a candle, flame flickering toward a doorway, or a breeze brushing against the cheek when no windows were open. These minor disturbances were interpreted by some as warnings, by others as confirmations of supernatural surveillance. They suggested that the nuns, or the forces connected to them, maintained some form of influence over the physical world, intervening subtly to guide, protect, or perhaps punish. Letters from former novices hinted at similar phenomena. The feeling of invisible guidance in daily life, cryptic symbols appearing in journals, and inexplicable knowledge of events happening beyond the valley. Together, these narratives reinforce the contrast between observable reality, the mundane, verifiable world, and subjective perception, where meaning was constructed from fragments, intuition, and fear. The gap between memory and interpretation is central to understanding the survivors' echoes. Villagers often remembered the same event differently, influenced by personal fear, expectation, or proximity to the convent. An event that one individual interpreted as a shadow of a lost nun might be dismissed by another as a play of light and fog. These discrepancies created a cultural space in which multiple truths could coexist, one based on physical observation, another on communal memory, and a third on spiritual interpretation. Each layer added tension to the narrative. The villagers' reticence, what they did not say, or what they could not articulate, was often more revealing than the words themselves. Silence became a medium of meaning, conveying both fear and reverence, suspicion, and hope. Psychologists examining historical accounts of the convent have highlighted the role of collective trauma. The sudden disappearance of 12 young women created a shockwave through a small community, affecting memory, perception, and interpretation. Fear, grief, and uncertainty interwove, shaping witness accounts and the social narrative for generations. Individuals were prone to suggestibility, prone to filling gaps in knowledge with culturally resonant explanations, the supernatural, divine intervention, or secret human malice. In this sense, the convent's echoes are not just spiritual or mystical. They are reflections of human psychology under extreme stress. Yet the repeated consistencies, the visions, the letters, the stone markings, resist easy dismissal, suggesting that whatever occurred that night left an imprint that transcended mere imagination. Spiritualists insisted that the nuns' presence persisted, acting as guardians or warning spirits. Seances conducted decades later in the valley recounted sightings, gestures, and cryptic communications. Participants described feelings of pressure in rooms, cold spots along corridors, and whispers that seemed both urgent and unintelligible. These phenomena were often dismissed by skeptics, yet the consistency of reports and the alignment with previously documented letters and symbols lent them a haunting credibility in the eyes of believers. For those who experienced them, the echoes of the nuns were tangible, a reminder that disappearance does not always equate to absence. The interplay of silence and communication, memory and interpretation, reality and perception, ultimately defines the surviving narrative. Witnesses may have unknowingly protected secrets too dangerous to articulate, or fear may have silenced truths that were within reach. Each indirect encounter, the letters, dreams, markings, or inexplicable sensations, adds a layer of complexity, challenging the boundaries of human understanding. By examining these echoes, one begins to see how absence can create presence, how silence can speak, and how perception can shape reality in ways both subtle and profound. The convent, in this sense, is not merely a physical structure. It is a psychological, social, and spiritual labyrinth, in which every fragment of evidence, every whispered memory, and every perceived manifestation contributes to a story that continues to haunt generations, defying explanation and evoking questions that remain unanswered. Over the decades, the disappearance of the 12 nuns from the Convent of Lost Souls has inspired theories as diverse as they are haunting, each reflecting the fears, hopes, and imaginations of those who confront the mystery. From the moment the sisters vanished, speculation surged, fueled by a mixture of incomplete records, eyewitness accounts, and cultural fascination with the unknown. Some claim that the nuns were murdered, victims of a meticulously orchestrated crime designed to conceal a forbidden secret. These theories often point to inconsistencies in witness testimonies, the sudden absence of any physical trace, and the mysterious symbols that appeared near the convent in the months following the disappearance. According to this perspective, someone, perhaps an outsider or a faction within the religious hierarchy, eliminated the sisters to protect knowledge, power, or wealth, leaving behind a trail deliberately designed to mislead investigators. The theory is chilling in its simplicity and plausibility. 12 women, removed quietly, and a secret that would never see the light of day. Yet others propose that the nuns disappeared voluntarily, guided by spiritual revelation or divine instruction. Letters and later testimonials, interpreted by believers, suggest that the sisters may have been summoned by a higher calling, leaving their lives behind to seek sanctity elsewhere. In this scenario, the convent itself becomes a launching point, rather than a site of tragedy. The sisters' disappearance is not the result of violence, but of devotion elevated to its most radical expression. Villagers who observed unexplained movements in the forest or flickers of light in the windows are said to have glimpsed the sisters' passage into a new life, hidden from human view but guided by unseen forces. The appeal of this theory lies in its moral clarity. The nuns are not victims, but active participants in a narrative of transcendence, elevating the disappearance from crime to miracle. Occult theories further complicate the landscape of speculation. Some researchers claim that the convent was a nexus for ritual, and that the nuns became unwilling participants in ceremonies whose purposes were never fully disclosed. Diaries discovered in later decades speak in metaphor and coded language, referencing midnight gatherings, synchronized chanting, and mystical symbols. To believers in the occult, these documents hint at practices intended to harness or commune with forces beyond human comprehension. Perhaps according to this theory, the disappearance was not a simple flight or murder, but the outcome of a ceremonial event gone awry, or of a deliberate selection of the sisters by powers beyond the material plane. The convent itself, isolated and imposing, with stone walls that echo the chants of devotion, becomes more than a building. It transforms into a character in the legend, its architecture and atmosphere actively shaping the events it witnesses. Scholars and skeptics approach these claims with measured analysis, examining the inconsistencies in witness accounts, the physical limitations of the environment, and the social and psychological dynamics at play. Footprints that vanish into fog, lights that flicker with no apparent source, and whispers heard in the night could all be explained by natural or human causes: fear, suggestion, and environmental phenomena. Yet the more rational explanations are proposed, the more they collide with the collective memory and narrative that has grown around the convent. Villagers' accounts, passed down orally, emphasize continuity and pattern, even when evidence is incomplete. The tension between empirical investigation and mythic interpretation creates a dual narrative, one rooted in observable events, the other in imagination and belief, and both equally compelling to those who seek closure or understanding. Paranormal enthusiasts and investigators have taken the story into modern times, conducting surveys of energy anomalies, electromagnetic disturbances, and strange acoustic phenomena in the abandoned buildings. Some report feelings of presence, unexplained cold spots, and recurring auditory illusions. Others claim to have captured shadows, fleeting figures, or patterns of light that defy natural explanation. Each investigation generates debate. Skeptics attribute the experiences to environmental factors, psychological priming, and equipment error. Believers interpret them as confirmation of lingering spirits or residual energy left by the sisters. The convent becomes a laboratory of human perception and belief, a site where reason and fear are tested against the inexplicable. The enduring fascination with the disappearance also reflects a universal human need to fill silence with narrative. 12 women vanished, leaving no body, no confession, no definitive explanation. Silence in this context is intolerable. It demands interpretation, speculation, and imagination. For some, the act of theorizing is a way to impose order on chaos. For others, it is an invitation to explore the dark recesses of human fear and hope. The variety of theories, murder, voluntary departure, ritual, supernatural influence, ensures that the legend continues to evolve. Each generation adds its own interpretation, blending folklore, psychology, and cultural context, creating a story that is at once historical and mythic, factual and allegorical. The story of the convent is further complicated by the human tendency to project moral and philosophical questions onto unexplained events. Some see the disappearance as a cautionary tale about devotion, obedience, and the dangers of isolation. Others interpret it as a story of liberation, an assertion of spiritual autonomy against rigid hierarchy. The occult interpretations invite reflection on the limits of human understanding, the potential for unseen forces, and the tension between power and vulnerability. Each theory serves a psychological function to make sense of uncertainty, to manage fear, and to reconcile human experience with the unknown. Even decades later, new evidence periodically emerges, letters, diary fragments, or anecdotal reports that reopens debate. Each new discovery is absorbed into the mythos, interpreted according to the lens of the observer. Paranormal investigators, historians, and casual enthusiasts alike contribute to the continuing narrative, ensuring that the story remains alive and evolving. The convent and the disappearance of its nuns serve as a mirror, reflecting human imagination, belief, and fear. They illustrate how mystery persists when evidence is incomplete, how silence breeds speculation, and how legend is created at the intersection of absence, perception, and the insatiable human need for explanation. Ultimately, the mystery endures precisely because no theory can definitively close the case. Every possibility, murder, voluntary departure, ritual, supernatural intervention, is both plausible and incomplete. The enduring fascination with the Convent of Lost Souls lies not in discovering the final truth, but in navigating the space between fact and interpretation, between what is known and what can only be imagined. The story becomes a canvas upon which generations project their own questions, fears, and beliefs, ensuring that the echoes of those 12 women continue to haunt both the physical and imaginative landscape. Silence, absence, and speculation intertwine, leaving the mystery unresolved, inviting endless debate and preserving the legend as a testament to the human need to confront the unknowable. The Convent of Lost Souls stands today as a silent sentinel over a valley steeped in mist and memory, its stone walls weathered but unyielding, holding secrets that time has not eroded. The disappearance of 12 nuns on that storm-laden night of 1873 remains an enigma that refuses resolution, an event suspended between history and legend. Every investigation, every séance, every witness account has layered new complexity onto the narrative, yet none have produced definitive answers. Were the sisters taken by human hands, victims of calculated cruelty, or swept away by forces that defy human understanding? The theories proliferate endlessly. Some argue for abduction or murder, implicating outsiders or even internal conspiracies within the convent. Others suggest voluntary departure, a radical act of devotion or escape from oppression. Still others invoke ritual, mystical intervention, or the supernatural, proposing that the sisters' disappearance was orchestrated by unseen forces. Each possibility carries weight, yet each remains unprovable, leaving the valley haunted not only by absence but by the questions themselves. The silence of the convent speaks as loudly as any testimony. Empty corridors, sealed chambers, and the occasional flicker of candlelight or shadow evoke a sense of presence, as if the sisters' essence lingers, defying the linear passage of time. Villagers and former novices continue to recount dreams, letters, and fleeting visions, all fragmented and contradictory, yet all suggesting that something beyond ordinary perception persists. Psychologists interpret these echoes as products of collective trauma and suggestion, while spiritualists insist they are genuine communications, manifestations of a truth inaccessible to rational analysis. The tension between empirical evidence and subjective experience, between science and belief, frames the story itself, forcing us to confront the limits of understanding. The case also reflects the human need to impose narrative on silence. When confronted with the inexplicable, humans create explanations that satisfy reason, emotion, or faith, but never fully satisfy all three simultaneously. The Convent of Lost Souls thus becomes more than an isolated historical mystery. It is a mirror reflecting the interplay of fear, imagination, and desire for comprehension. We are drawn to it because it challenges our assumptions, blurs boundaries between fact and myth, and confronts us with the unsettling reality that some events may forever elude closure. The nun's disappearance prompts reflection on human nature, our capacity for devotion, our susceptibility to fear, our fascination with the unknown, and our enduring hope for resolution even when none exists. Perhaps the sisters vanished into the forest, leaving behind only faint footprints that the rain washed away. Perhaps they remain, not in body, but in the lingering energy of stone, shadow, and chant that fills the convent's halls. Perhaps the answer lies outside comprehension entirely, a truth that resists human language and logic. The Convent of Lost Souls does not offer closure. It offers questions, haunting, persistent, and unresolved. And so, centuries later, the Satua mystery persists, drawing us back into the misty valley and its empty chapel, asking us to confront the unknowable and ultimately leaving a single, enduring question. What do you believe happened to the 12 nuns?